snow blanketed Chicago like a silent ocean, swallowing every sound except the soft crunch of Gabriel Stone's polished shoes on the pavement. The city glimmered around him, ice on glass towers, gold light spilling from penthouse windows, but to him, it all looked lifeless. His breath hung in the air, visible and hollow. Moments ago, he'd stood in a ballroom surrounded by applause and champagne, praised for donating millions to a homelessness foundation he'd never visit. He'd smiled, shaken hands, said the right things. But now, walking away from it all, he couldn't remember a single face in the crowd. The words giving back echoed in his head like a joke that had lost its punchline. He turned down a quieter street, away from the luxury cars and laughter that drifted from the gala's glass doors. Snowflakes swirled beneath street lamps, each one catching the light for an instant before vanishing. The wind grew sharper, biting through his tailored coat. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't call his driver. He just wanted silence, a night without noise, without the hum of success ringing in his ears. Then he heard it. A sound so faint he thought it was the wind at first, a fragile cough, then a small whimper. He stopped mid-step. The city around him seemed to freeze. He turned toward an alley where a flickering streetlight blinked like a dying heartbeat. And under that light, huddled beside a half-collapsed cardboard box, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her hair was tangled, her coat threadbare, her shoes soaked through. She was curled tight, arms wrapped around a tattered notebook as if it were the only thing keeping her alive. Snow gathered on her shoulders, melting into her skin. For a long moment, Gabriel just stood there, the image carving itself into his mind like frost on glass. Then instinct overrode hesitation. He stepped forward, his expensive leather shoes sinking into slush, his breath catching in the cold air. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling down beside her. His voice came out gentler than he expected, almost unsure. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay?" Her eyes flickered open, deep brown, dull from exhaustion yet startlingly aware. She flinched at his voice, clutching her notebook tighter. "It's all right," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. What's your name?" She hesitated, her lips trembling. "Clara," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Okay, Clara," he said, his own voice cracking slightly. "Where are your parents?" Her answer came after a long pause, so soft he almost didn't hear it. "Gone." Her eyes dropped to the snow. "But I write them letters, so they don't forget me." The words hit him like a blow. Something inside his chest shifted, a pressure he hadn't felt in years. Since before the boardrooms, before the success, before the loneliness he'd built around himself like armor. He stared at the little girl, her small hands trembling as she held that notebook against her heart. He wanted to ask more, but his throat tightened. All he could manage was a whisper. "How long have you been out here?" She didn't answer. Her eyelids fluttered, her body shuddering violently. Snowflakes settled on her lashes. Gabriel shrugged off his long black coat and wrapped it around her small frame, the fine wool swallowing her completely. Her body felt weightless when he lifted her, but her cold seeped into him like a curse. As he carried her toward the street, the wind howled through the alley, and the city lights blurred into a haze. Somewhere far above, on the giant screens of downtown Chicago, Gabriel's face still smiled in advertisements for his company's Winter of Hope campaign. The irony cut deep. He, the man who claimed to help others, had walked past thousands of stories like this without seeing them. But not tonight. Tonight he had found one story he couldn't ignore. A shivering little girl named Clara, holding letters to ghosts, and for the first time in years, Gabriel Stone felt the sharp, undeniable ache of being human. Gabriel's driver stared through the windshield in confusion as his boss emerged from the storm, cradling a bundle of fabric in his arms. The man hurried out, opening the rear door, but Gabriel shook his head. "Front seat," he ordered, his tone low but urgent. Snow clung to his hair, melting down the lines of his face. The driver hesitated only a second before starting the heater full blast. He eased Clara into the passenger seat, wrapping her tighter in the heavy coat. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, dazed by the sudden warmth. "Where are we going?" she murmured, voice fragile as cracked glass. Someplace safe, Gabriel said, fastening the seatbelt gently around her. You'll be warm soon, I promise. She nodded weakly, her head leaning against the window as frost began to melt from her lashes. He studied her small face in the dim light, the hollow cheeks, the tiny cut on her lip, the smudge of dirt across her chin, and for a fleeting second, he saw his own daughter's face there, the one he'd lost long ago. The memory hit him like a gust of icy wind. He looked away quickly, swallowing hard. The drive to the penthouse was silent, except for the hum of the engine and the faint hiss of the heater. Snow fell heavier now, thick enough to blur the skyline. When they reached the private garage, Gabriel lifted her again, her fingers gripping his collar as though she feared he might disappear. The elevator ride to the top floor felt endless. His reflection in the mirrored walls startled him, his immaculate tuxedo now wrinkled, his bow tie undone, his arms full of a child who didn't belong to his world. And yet, for the first time in years, the image didn't feel empty. When the doors slid open, a rush of artificial warmth greeted them. The penthouse glowed with soft gold light reflecting off marble and glass. Everything inside was pristine, untouched, like a museum for a man who'd forgotten how to live in it. He set her carefully on the couch near the fireplace. The moment the flames flickered to life, her eyes widened. She held out her small hands toward the heat as though touching something sacred. "It's so warm," she whispered. Gabriel crouched beside her. "When did you last eat?" She blinked, thinking hard. "Yesterday morning, I think. I had a piece of bread from a cafe. The man didn't see me take it." The shame in her voice cut deep. He rose and went to the kitchen, fumbling through cupboards that hadn't been opened in months. He found a box of instant soup and an unopened loaf of bread, the simplest meal he'd made in decades. When he returned, she was curled on the couch, tracing patterns on the glass table with her finger, her notebook beside her. She jumped when he placed the tray down, then relaxed at the sight of the bowl. "It's hot," he said softly. "Be careful." She blew on the spoon and took a sip. Her eyes fluttered shut. "It tastes like home," she murmured. He wasn't sure whether to smile or break. Instead, he sat quietly, watching her eat, realizing how strange it was to see someone so grateful for something he'd always taken for granted. When she finished, she clutched the notebook again. He nodded toward it. "Can I see what's inside?" She hesitated, then slowly handed it over. The cover was bent, the pages wrinkled. Inside were dozens of letters written in uneven handwriting. "Dear Mommy, today I saw a lady with a baby. I think you would have smiled. Dear Daddy, I still wait at the corner where you said goodbye. Dear God, if you see them, tell them I'm being good." By the time he reached the last page, his vision blurred. At the bottom of one unfinished letter were 4 words written shakily. "I'm still waiting here." He looked up, his throat tight. "Clara, who helps you write these?" She blinked, puzzled. "No one. Mommy said if I keep writing, they'll hear me someday. Letters don't need stamps in heaven." Her faith, innocent and unbroken despite the cruelty of her world, struck him harder than any boardroom failure ever had. He gently closed the notebook and handed it back. "Clara," he said quietly, "tonight you're not alone anymore. You'll stay here, all right?" She hesitated, eyes wide with disbelief. "You mean I can sleep here?" "Inside?" He nodded. "Inside, where it's warm." She smiled faintly, a fragile, flickering thing. "Then maybe they'll find me easier if I'm not in the snow." As she drifted to sleep by the fire, clutching her notebook like a lifeline, Gabriel stood by the window, staring out over the glittering city. Below, Chicago shone with wealth and motion, yet it had left this little girl to freeze in silence. For the first time, he hated the reflection staring back at him, the man who owned the lights but hadn't noticed the shadows beneath them. He turned away from the glass, watching the small figure on his couch. Somewhere deep in his chest, something long dormant stirred. He didn't know what it was yet. Guilt, maybe. Or grace. But as snow fell quietly against the windows, Gabriel Stone knew one thing for certain. His life, from this night on, would never be the same. Morning came slowly, spilling pale gold light through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse. The storm had quieted, leaving the city blanketed in white silence. For once, there were no meetings, no alarms, no calls from assistants or investors, just the faint crackle of the dying fire and the steady rhythm of small breaths coming from the couch. Gabriel Stone stood by the kitchen counter, watching the girl sleep. Clara was curled beneath his cashmere blanket, her face half buried, one hand clutching that worn little notebook like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to the world. Her hair, messy and tangled, glimmered faintly in the sunlight. For a fleeting moment, he wondered how long it had been since someone had tucked her in. He brewed coffee, the aroma filling the room, and warmed a glass of milk beside it. The sound stirred her. She blinked, disoriented, sitting up too quickly as if ready to flee. For a moment, panic flashed in her eyes, until she saw him standing there. "You're still here," she said, surprised. He smiled softly. "So are you. That's a good start." Her lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile before she glanced around, awed and uncertain. "This is your house?" she asked. "Yes, it's really shiny." Gabriel let out a breath that could have been a laugh. "Too shiny, maybe." He handed her the warm glass. "Here, careful, it's hot." She wrapped both hands around it, taking a cautious sip. "It's sweet," she whispered. "Like the milk my mom used to make when I was sick." The words landed heavy. He forced a nod, pretending not to feel the sting behind his eyes. "Then I'm glad I got it right." After breakfast, she followed him around the penthouse, quiet but curious. Her small feet padded across marble floors, pausing at glass walls and framed photographs. She stopped before one, a smiling teenage girl with chestnut hair and bright eyes. "She's pretty," Clara said. "Is she your daughter?" Gabriel froze. His throat tightened. "She was," he said softly. "Her name was Emily. What happened?" He hesitated. "She got sick. A long time ago?" Clara's gaze softened. "My mom got sick too," she said simply, as if that explained everything. In a way, it did. They stood there in silence for a moment, two people bound by loss they didn't yet understand. Then she turned to the grand piano near the window, a gleaming black relic that hadn't been played in nearly a decade. "Can you play?" she asked. "A little," he said, surprised by how easily the word came. "Play something happy." He sat down, his fingers stiff as they touched the keys. He tried to remember the melody Emily used to hum before bed, something soft and simple. The first few notes were clumsy, hesitant, but then the sound began to fill the room. Clara leaned against the piano, humming quietly along, her voice thin but pure. When the last note faded, she smiled. "That's better," she said. "You looked lonely before." He blinked. "I did?" She nodded, completely certain. "Rich people always look sad." He laughed under his breath, but the sound came out broken. "You might be right." As she wandered off to explore, he began folding her torn coat to wash it. And that's when he noticed it. A small white tag stitched into the lining, half faded but still legible. St. Helena Children's Hospital. Patient, Clara M. He froze. That hospital's name carved through his memory like a blade. It was the same place his daughter had spent her last days. The same sterile hallways, the same smell of antiseptic and loss. He sank into a chair, gripping the coat like it might vanish. Coincidence, he tried to tell himself. But the ache in his chest said otherwise. When Clara came back, dragging his blanket behind her, he forced a smile. "Where did your mom take you when she was sick?" Her expression darkened. "The big white place," she said. "With cold floors. Mommy called it Saint something. St. Helena's?" he asked carefully. Her eyes widened. "You know it?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I do." She seemed to relax at that, as if knowing he'd been there made him less of a stranger. But inside, Gabriel felt his stomach turn. Fate had a cruel way of circling back. That night, after she fell asleep again, he poured himself a drink he didn't touch. He sat by the fire, her small coat folded beside him, the tag glinting in the light. He thought of all the signatures he'd made over the years, Contracts, mergers, layoffs, policies, thousands of decisions that affected lives he never saw. And he wondered, for the first time, how many other Claras his world had created without ever knowing their names. Outside, the wind rose again, whispering through the glass. He stared at the sleeping child, and the thought came unbidden, heavy and frighteningly clear. She wasn't just a child he'd found. She was a mirror, showing him everything he had refused to see. Night fell over Chicago once more, the city glittering beneath the snow like a field of diamonds. Inside the penthouse, Gabriel sat in his study, the lights dim, the fire a faint flicker in the reflection of the glass walls. He hadn't worked all day. The reports, the contracts, the endless numbers on his tablet, all of it felt meaningless beside the sound of Clara's quiet breathing in the next room. She'd fallen asleep early, curled up with her notebook and his oversized blanket, the faintest smile on her face. For a child who had lost everything, she still somehow carried peace, as if hope itself refused to leave her. Gabriel envied that. He turned his attention to her notebook again. He had promised himself not to read more, but curiosity or guilt pulled him back. The handwriting was uneven, the words spilling across the page in blue crayon. "Dear Mommy, I went to the park again today. The lights are still there. They make the snow look like stars. I keep waiting where you said you'd come back. I think you're just late." His chest tightened. He turned another page. "Dear Daddy, I hope you're with Mommy now. I know you didn't mean to go. I forgive you." And then another, different this time. "Dear Santa, can you tell the man in the tall glass building that Mommy tried her best? She worked even when she was sick. She said he'd help her. But he never came." Gabriel's blood went cold. He froze, staring at the words. The man in the tall glass building, it couldn't be. It couldn't mean him. And yet, deep down, he already knew. His company, the Stone Group, owned more than half the skyscrapers in this city. He'd spent years signing documents without reading the fine print. Budget cuts, layoffs, terminations. Entire departments erased with a stroke of his pen. He rushed to his office, flicking on his computer. Fingers trembling, he opened the employee archives. His eyes scanned line after line until he found it. Maria Miller, cafeteria staff terminated 2016, budget reduction, medical noncompliance. He clicked the file. A photograph appeared. A woman with warm brown eyes and tired cheeks, wearing a white apron and smiling faintly at the camera. The resemblance was unmistakable. Clara's eyes, Maria's eyes, Gabriel's throat went dry. The reason for termination hit him harder than any boardroom confrontation ever had. Employee requested medical leave due to late-stage illness. Denied pending insurance review. He remembered the meeting vaguely, a short briefing from his operations manager about cutting costs in the hospitality sector. He hadn't even looked at the names. He had signed the order. He had signed her death. He leaned back in his chair, heart pounding, hands shaking. The walls felt closer, the silence heavier. Every success, every magazine cover, every award, all of it stood on a foundation built from choices like that. Invisible pain, forgotten faces. And now, one of those faces had found its way back to him, in the form of a freezing child he'd nearly walked past. The next morning, Clara found him in the kitchen, his suit rumpled, eyes red. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. He forced a tired smile. "No, I had some work to finish." She studied him with the strange intuition only children have. "You look like you were crying." He opened his mouth to deny it, but something in her gaze stopped him. "Maybe I was," he admitted quietly. She slid onto the stool beside him, her small hands gripping the edge of the counter. "Mommy used to say crying doesn't mean you're weak. It means your heart remembers what it's for." He stared at her, lost for words. The simplicity of it undid him. That day, while she watched cartoons and drew pictures of stars and angels, Gabriel made a call to St. Helena's Hospital. The nurse on duty confirmed it. Maria Miller, deceased 2017, survived by one child. Clara Miller, placed under temporary foster care, later missing. That word echoed in his mind like a verdict. He thanked the nurse and ended the call. his voice barely steady. Clara was still sitting by the fire, her crayon drawing taking shape on the coffee table. It was two figures, one tall, one small, standing under falling snow. Above them, in uneven letters, she'd written, "The man who found me." Gabriel sat beside her, the weight of 1,000 regrets pressing down on him. "Clara," he said softly, "if your mom were here right now, what would you want her to know?" She paused, thinking. "That I'm not scared anymore," she said finally. "That someone helped me when she couldn't," he swallowed hard. "She'd be proud of you," he whispered. "And maybe," she said, glancing up with a shy smile, "she'd be proud of you too." The words shattered him completely. For years, he'd built walls of glass and steel to keep the world out. But in that single moment, a little girl with frost-bitten hands and a notebook full of hope had torn them all down. As snow began to fall again outside, Gabriel Stone made a silent vow, a vow he couldn't undo. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would make this right. He would honor the woman his company had failed, and the child who had forced him to remember he still had a soul. The morning light was thin and gray, the kind of light that made even the city's towers look weary. Gabriel Stone hadn't slept again. The truth he had uncovered the night before played over and over in his mind like a punishment. Maria Miller, the cafeteria worker whose life his decision had quietly erased. The woman who'd once believed the system would protect her. The woman whose daughter now slept in his home. He stood by the window, a steaming cup of coffee cooling in his hands, watching snow swirl down over Chicago. He had always prided himself on control. Every outcome, every deal, every move, predicted, planned, perfected. But this was chaos wrapped in innocence. A child who shouldn't exist in his world, yet somehow belonged in it more than he ever had. Behind him, Clara stirred on the couch. Her small voice broke the silence. "You were up all night again." Gabriel turned. "I had some thinking to do." She tilted her head, eyes wide with curiosity. "Are you sad about something?" He hesitated. I'm sad about too many things." Clara nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Then maybe you should write letters like me." "It helps," he smiled faintly. "You might be onto something, kid." Later that day, he made a decision that frightened him more than any board meeting ever had. He called his chief financial officer, requesting every file related to the 2016 terminations. The man on the other end was baffled. "Sir, those cases are years old." "Why the sudden—" "Just send them," Gabriel interrupted, his tone sharp. "And have our charitable division contact St. Helena's. I want a full report on their current funding." "Understood." "Sir?" the voice replied, confused but obedient. By noon, Gabriel was behind the wheel of his black sedan, heading toward the south end of the city. Clara rode beside him, bundled in his scarf, her tiny fingers tracing shapes in the fogged window. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere important," he said. The drive was long and quiet, past the sleek skyscrapers and into the neighborhoods his company never visited. They stopped in front of a weathered brick building with faded blue paint, St. Helena's Children's Home. Clara's breath hitched when she saw the sign. "I know this place," she whispered. "I used to wait by that fence every Sunday. In case Mommy came back." Gabriel's chest tightened. He killed the engine and stepped out, the wind biting against his face. Together they walked through the rusted gates. A nurse recognized Clara instantly, her eyes filling with shock and tears. "My God," she said softly, kneeling beside the girl. "You're alive," Clara smiled shyly. "I found someone," she said. "He's helping me." The nurse looked up at Gabriel, her expression a mix of relief and disbelief. "She was one of the kindest souls we had here. Used to give her blanket to the smaller kids. We searched for months after she disappeared. Everyone thought—" Her voice trailed off. "I found her near the park," Gabriel said quietly. "Freezing to death." The nurse's eyes glistened. "Then you saved her life." "No," he thought bitterly. "I'm only trying to give it back." Before they left, Clara tugged his hand and led him to a small memorial wall near the garden. The names of lost children and parents were engraved into the stone. Among them, Maria Miller, 1989-2017. Clara touched the name gently. "That's her," she said. "That's Mommy." Gabriel crouched beside her, his voice a whisper. "She was a brave woman, Clara." "She said people were good," Clara murmured, "even when they forgot to show it." He closed his eyes, tears burning behind them. She was right. That night, back at the penthouse, Gabriel sat at his desk, surrounded by open folders and glowing screens. He reviewed the policies that had failed Maria: insurance cuts, unpaid leave rejections, employee downsizing forms, all signed by him. Each line felt like another nail in a coffin he'd built without realizing. He picked up his pen and began to write, not another contract, but a letter. Not to his shareholders, but to a woman who'd never hear it. "Maria, I'm sorry. I was blind. I let numbers matter more than faces. Your daughter shouldn't have suffered for my ignorance. I promise you this. I'll fix what I can, even if it takes the rest of my life." He folded the letter carefully and slid it into the pages of Clara's notebook, between her crayon drawings and prayers. The next morning, he drove downtown to meet his board. The room fell silent when he entered, coat still dusted with snow, eyes hard with purpose. "I'm reinstating the healthcare fund we shut down in 2016, he announced. "And I want a foundation created under Maria Miller's name, housing, jobs, and medical support for every family we failed." The executives exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir," one of them began, "that's going to cost millions." The shareholders, "Then tell them the debt is mine," Gabriel said flatly. "Because it is." He left before they could argue. Outside, the snow had started again, slow and quiet. When he returned home, Clara was waiting by the window, holding her bunny in one hand and a drawing in the other. She showed it to him shyly, a tall man and a little girl standing beside a building with a heart drawn over its door. "What's this?" he asked. "Our bakery," she said proudly. "I want to open one someday, like Mommy wanted." He looked at her, the weight of his promise solidifying in his chest. "Then we'll make it happen," he said. "Really? Really? But it won't just be a bakery, Clara. It'll be a place where no one ever feels cold again." Her smile bloomed like spring in the dead of winter. And for the first time in years, Gabriel Stone felt warmth, real, human warmth, fill the frozen chambers of his heart. Outside, snowflakes drifted past the glass, but inside, something new had begun to thaw. The storm returned that evening with a vengeance. Wind screamed between the towers, bending the trees along the boulevard like they were trying to hide from something invisible. Inside the penthouse, the fire burned low and steady, but Gabriel felt none of its warmth. He stood at the window again, staring down at the city that glittered beneath layers of ice and secrets. His reflection looked unfamiliar, tired, older, but more alive than it had in years. Behind him, the quiet scrape of a chair broke his thoughts. Clara was sitting at the kitchen counter, her little hands busy shaping dough between her palms. The flour dusted across her sleeves like snow. She looked up at him, smiling faintly. "You said we'd try baking today." Gabriel turned, softening. "That's right," he said, walking over. He had almost forgotten. She had insisted that morning that every good place needed bread, the way the sky needed stars. He rolled up his sleeves, and for the first time in years, Gabriel Stone, billionaire, CEO, man of glass and marble, found himself kneading dough beside a child. Clara giggled when he fumbled the flour. "You're bad at this," she teased. "I'm terrible," he admitted, smiling despite himself. "But I'm learning." When the oven timer finally chimed, the scent filled the apartment, warm, sweet, alive. Clara closed her eyes, breathing it in. "Smells like when Mommy was happy," she said. Gabriel froze, his chest tightening. "She used to bake?" "All the time," Clara said softly. "She said bread feeds the body, but love feeds the heart. That's why her bakery was called Bread and Love." He blinked. "She had a bakery?" "Yeah," Clara said, wiping flour on her cheek. "But then she got sick and we lost it. She said maybe one day I'd open it again." Something electric passed through him. Fate, maybe, or guilt given shape. Bread and Love. The name he'd seen on the list of shuttered businesses during one of his expansion projects years ago. He had never thought twice about it. He spent the night digging through city records, confirming what his heart already knew. Bread and Love Bakery, owned by Maria Miller, closed due to property repossession. Stone Properties, 2017. His breath caught. He had taken her job, her health, and her home. When he turned, Clara was asleep on the couch again, the smell of bread still in the air. The city lights shimmered on her face, and something inside him broke open. He realized then that he couldn't just give her comfort. He needed to give her back the life that had been stolen. The next morning, he made phone calls. To contractors. To zoning boards. To his legal team. By noon, he'd purchased the deed to the old bakery property. 2 days later, he drove Clara through the winding streets until they reached a quiet corner of Old Harbor. The building stood there, cracked and forgotten, half buried in snow. The sign still hung above the door, letters faded but visible. Bread and Love. Clara stared, frozen in place. "That's it," she whispered. "That's where Mommy worked." Gabriel knelt beside her. "We're going to fix it," he said. Her eyes widened. "Fix it?" "Yes," he said, voice firm, steady. "You and me. We'll bring it back." She blinked, as if trying to see if he was joking. "But we don't have money for that." He smiled. "We have something better. We have a promise." Over the next week, the silent bakery filled with life again. Workers repaired windows, scrubbed walls, and patched the roof. Gabriel oversaw everything himself, but the real foreman was Clara, standing on a stool, sketching sign ideas with crayons. She wanted to keep the same name but add one word. Laya's Light. Bread and Love. When he asked why, she said, "Because Mommy said love feeds the heart, but light helps people find it." He couldn't speak. He just nodded, blinking away the sting in his eyes. By the end of the week, the bakery's scent drifted down the street once more. People passing by stopped to watch, some recognizing the name. They asked questions, smiled, offered to help. Word spread faster than snowmelt. Inside, Clara twirled in her new white apron, giggling as she arranged cookies on a tray. Gabriel watched from the counter, sleeves rolled up, flour dusting his hair. "Looks perfect," he said. She grinned. Mommy would have said the same thing. Outside, cameras began flashing. Reporters had caught wind of the story. Billionaire restoring a dead bakery, helping a homeless girl. They called it a miracle. Others called it a publicity stunt. But inside, Gabriel and Clara didn't care. The laughter, the smell of bread, the light flickering across her smile, this was all that mattered. As the snow fell heavier that evening, Gabriel locked the bakery doors, turned off the lights, and knelt beside her. "You did good today, kiddo," she beamed. "We both did." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, voice low. "Tomorrow the world might say things that aren't true about us. But you remember this. What we did today, that's real." She nodded, sleepy but happy. "We made a warm place," she whispered. He smiled. "We did." And as she drifted off in his arms, the lights of Laya's Light glowed softly through the snowstorm, a small beacon in a cold city. Gabriel didn't know yet what storms tomorrow would bring. All he knew was that he'd finally found something worth protecting. The morning after the bakery's reopening, the world no longer felt like Gabriel's. It belonged to Clara, and to the scent of bread drifting out of Laya's Light. Crowds had gathered outside since dawn, drawn not by his reputation, but by warmth, laughter, and the promise of something kind. Inside, the ovens glowed and Clara hummed softly as she stacked loaves into neat rows, her little apron dusted with flour. For the first time in years, Gabriel felt something close to peace. But peace, he soon learned, is fragile. By mid-afternoon, his phone began buzzing. A dozen missed calls, then 20. His assistant's frantic voice finally broke through the noise. "Sir, you need to see this, now." He stepped into his office at the back of the bakery. On the large screen behind the counter, headlines flashed in bold red banners. "Billionaire adopts homeless girl without clearance." "Gabriel Stone's charity project. Heartwarming or PR spin?" Where's the line between compassion and controversy? He felt his stomach twist. The photos were everywhere. Him kneeling beside Clara, carrying her through the snow, laughing as they baked. What had been private, sacred moments were now public spectacle. When he returned to the front, the laughter had faded. A group of strangers stood at the window snapping pictures. Clara looked up from the counter, confused. Why are they doing that? He forced a steady smile. It's nothing, sweetheart, just people being curious. But even as he said it, his phone buzzed again, this time from the Stone Group's boardroom. He didn't answer. Instead, he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Finish the cookies. I'll be right back. Outside, he called his lawyer. Tell me what we're facing. Grace Coleman's voice came calm but serious. Child Protective Services received multiple reports, Gabriel. They're sending officers tonight to evaluate her placement. Legally, you have no guardianship rights yet. They could take her into custody. He froze. The snow began to fall again, softly, almost cruelly. No, she's safe here. You'll tell them that. I will, Grace said. But you have to prepare yourself. The system doesn't see heart, it sees paperwork. When he hung up, the lights of the bakery seemed to dim. Inside, Clara was packaging bread for an old woman who had come in to buy a loaf. Her voice was soft, kind. The same kindness that had pulled him out of his own darkness. He walked back inside, each step heavier than the last. Clara looked up and smiled. I made one for you, she said, handing him a small roll shaped like a heart. He couldn't speak. He just nodded, setting it gently on the counter. Hours later, as the sun sank beyond the snow-dusted skyline, 2 government cars stopped outside the bakery. The officers stepped out, a man and a woman in dark coats, badges glinting beneath the lights. Clara's laughter faded. Who are they? Gabriel's voice barely held. They're people who want to talk to me. The female officer's tone was gentle but firm. Mr. Stone, we're here regarding your arrangement with the minor Clara Miller. We'll need to take her into temporary protective custody until her case can be reviewed. No, he said instantly. She's not a case. She's a child. My responsibility. Sir, please don't make this harder, the male officer said. Behind him, Clara's small hand slipped into his. You said no more cold nights, she whispered, her voice trembling. He knelt, looking into her frightened eyes. And I meant it, he said. I'll fix this. I promise. When they led her away, she turned once more, pressing her notebook into his hands. Keep this safe, she said, so I don't forget where I belong. Then she was gone. The bakery felt emptier than it had the night he first found her. The ovens went cold. The silence felt heavier than any storm. Later that evening, as news crews filled the streets outside, Gabriel sat alone by the counter, her notebook open to the last page she'd written. Dear Mommy, I think I found the man who was supposed to help you. He's helping me now. Please tell him not to give up. He pressed the page to his chest, eyes burning. I won't, he whispered to no one. I swear I won't. That night, Gabriel Stone prepared for the fight of his life, not for wealth, not for pride, but for the right to keep a promise made to a little girl in the snow. The city was hushed the next morning, the snow outside falling in slow, drifting sheets. Inside the penthouse, Gabriel Stone sat at his piano, her small notebook open beside him, its pages trembling in the draft from the window. He hadn't played a note since she'd been taken. Every sound in the world felt meaningless without her laughter filling the space. The news hadn't stopped. His name was everywhere. Accusations, speculation, opinion pieces dissecting his motives. The world that had once worshipped him now wanted to tear him apart. Yet through all of it, one truth burned steady in his chest. He couldn't let her go. The call from Grace Coleman came just after dawn. The hearing is today, she said. 11 a.m., juvenile court. They'll decide whether she stays in state custody or with you. He didn't hesitate. I'll be there. When he arrived, cameras flashed outside the courthouse, reporters shouting questions. Is she your daughter, Mr. Stone? Is this a publicity stunt? Do you regret what you did? He ignored them all. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than he expected, colder too. Clara sat at the front with a social worker, clutching her bunny and staring at the floor. Her hair was neatly brushed, but her eyes were dim, her light dimmed by fear. When she saw him walk in, her face flickered with something fragile, hope. Grace touched his arm. "Let me do the talking," she whispered. The judge entered. Papers rustled. The opposing counsel began their argument, crisp and clinical. Mr. Stone violated procedure, brought a minor into his home without notifying authorities, and exploited her for public attention. His actions, while emotionally appealing, were irresponsible and unlawful. Each word landed like a blow. Gabriel stared at the table, jaw tight. Then Grace stood. "Your Honor, I represent a man who didn't see a case. He saw a child freezing to death in the snow. He didn't think about cameras or headlines. He thought about saving her life. Mr. Stone has since provided food, shelter, education, and a safe environment. The bakery they rebuilt together has become a community center for dozens of families. If compassion is a crime, then we should all be guilty." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The judge turned to Gabriel. "Mr. Stone, do you wish to say anything?" He rose slowly, his hands trembling. "Your Honor," he began, voice unsteady, "I've built towers across this city. But none of them mattered the night I found that little girl in the snow. I didn't know who she was. I didn't know she was the daughter of a woman my company failed. But I knew I couldn't walk away. I've spent my life chasing success, and it gave me nothing. He glanced at Clara, his eyes softening. "She gave me something real. A reason to care again," his voice cracked. "I don't want to replace her mother. I just want to keep the promise her mother never got the chance to fulfill, that she'd never be alone again." The courtroom went silent. Then, from the front row, a small voice broke the stillness. "He fixes hearts," Clara whispered, standing up, holding her bunny tight. "He fixed mine." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the judge's stern expression softened. She cleared her throat, blinking hard. "The law recognizes structure," she said slowly, "but it also recognizes love when it sees it." She looked down at her notes, then back up. "Temporary guardianship is hereby granted to Mr. Stone, pending full adoption review." For a moment, Gabriel couldn't move. Then Clara broke free from the social worker and ran straight into his arms. The courtroom erupted in applause. Cameras flashed through the glass doors, but he didn't see them. He only felt her small arms around his neck and her whisper against his ear. "Told you you'd fix it." That evening, they returned to the bakery. The lights were on, the windows fogged from warmth, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. The sign above the door glowed softly. Laya's Light, Bread and Love. Ava was there too, his estranged daughter, standing behind the counter, arranging cookies. She turned when she saw them, her expression uncertain at first, then tender. "She's smaller than I imagined," Ava said with a small laugh. "But I can see why you fought for her." Gabriel smiled through the ache in his throat. "Guess I finally got something right." "Yeah," Ava said, stepping closer. "You did." The three of them stood together under the golden glow of the bakery lights, a family not by blood, but by grace. Weeks passed, and the bakery became a haven for everyone who had ever been forgotten. Gabriel's name, once synonymous with wealth, became a symbol of compassion. The foundation he built, Maria's Promise, funded shelters and scholarships in Clara's mother's name. On Christmas Eve, a year to the day since he found her, Gabriel woke early and went to the bakery. Clara was already there, hanging up paper angels near the window. Each one had a handwritten wish: no more cold nights. No more lonely hearts, he smiled. "You've been busy," she turned, beaming. "It's our Christmas tree. Everyone gets to hang a hope." As the first customers arrived, the city outside shimmered beneath the falling snow. Gabriel looked around at the faces filling the little shop, neighbors, families, children, and felt something he hadn't known he was missing: belonging. That night, after closing, he, Ava, and Clara walked to the park across the street. The Christmas tree in Boston Common glowed brighter than ever. Clara reached into her pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked. "A promise," she said softly. He unfolded it. In her careful handwriting were 3 words: "No more cold." His eyes filled. He knelt, pulling her close. "You kept your promise, Clara." She smiled. "No," she whispered, looking between him and Ava. "We kept it together." Snow fell around them, soft as memory. The city lights blurred into halos. When they returned to the bakery, Gabriel framed her note beside the old bunny and the plaque that read, "For every child who just needed one more chance." He turned off the lights and looked back once more before locking the door. The shop glowed softly through the glass, a single warm light in a world too often cold. In that moment, Gabriel Stone finally understood. He hadn't saved a girl that night in the snow. She had saved him.